In a 5-2 decision this week, the Colorado State Supreme Court ruled that the Taxpayer Bill of Rights could be abolished by voters with just one vote on a future ballot. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, the Colorado Legislative Council updated revenue forecasts and announced that taxpayers could get a sales tax refund and a state income tax cut thanks to TABOR. Patty, TABOR and this show got on the scene the very same year, and we've been talking about TABOR since the very beginning. What does these latest decisions mean for the future of TABOR from what we can see right now?
That we will be talking about it 27 years from now. Yeah, when this show started, TABOR was in diapers, and now we are, or some of us are. It's extraordinary, but the Supreme Court decision that came down is what's really extraordinary, because 2 years after TABOR, you got the single item issue coming down where you couldn't have these complicated amendments and measures. You had to have a single topic. And now they've said there could actually be a proposal to repeal all of TABOR in one fell swoop, which no one expected, including the people who kind of sent it to the Supreme Court. So that isn't going to come up in 2019. We're going to see instead CC, which has been referred by the legislature. But over the last 27 years, we've seen so many different votes on TABOR. Most of the municipalities, and I have to say, most people like that one part of TABOR where people get to vote on whether they want new taxes. And I think that is going to stay, and we will be talking about that probably in 27 more years. But in 2020, I think we will see a bill to repeal TABOR altogether.
Ed, TABOR is politically tricky ground all over the place. So you look at the headlines from this week and it's like, oh, well, gosh, now there's going to be something to repeal it. And then you go, oh, well, wait a second. You hear comments from Governor Polis who say, well, I think people like voting for their own taxes, so maybe we shouldn't tackle that part. So I could see people on both sides supporting TABOR and opposing TABOR, seeing something positive from the news this week. What do you think?
Well, I think this is going to be really tricky ground for the Democrats in particular if Carol Hedges and the Colorado Fiscal Institute decide to move forward with a full repeal ballot measure. Because as you said, as Governor Polis said, Governor Polis, not a conservative, that people like voting on their own taxes. And I think it is political dynamite if you put something that is a straight repeal on there, because nobody will be talking about the ratchet down rule. Nobody will be talking about excess revenues and how they are apportioned out to the voters or kept by local government. A straight repeal means this is what you will ask voters. Do you still want to vote on tax increases? Really? I don't think you do. Do you? That is not a good campaign. I think what people need to do now is to see how they can slice and dice this. Now they kind of know they have this carte blanche to not just ask one particular question, which was always the issue with, potentially getting rid of the ratchet down effect, which limits how government can build back up its resources after a recession, because you have to explain that to the voters. If you could somehow go after that and some of the other parts of TABOR and do a really well-funded and informed campaign to explain that to voters, you might get what you want. But I would highly recommend against asking voters to stop being able to approve tax increases.
Scott, I know from just following you on Twitter and knowing the Bell Policy Center, TABOR has not been held dear to your heart. There's a lot of folks in the same place. But there's other parts of the news this week that impact the CC campaign, that referendum that's going to be this fall, because even the folks that put it on, referred it to the ballot, didn't know there would be a lot of money to spend. They came out this week saying, we didn't think there'd be a whole lot of money there. Now there's reports there's going to be a whole chunk of money. Well, again, you have reasons to smile on both sides of that. On the proponent side, well, great. Now we actually have some money that we can spend on education and transportation. Wonderful. And on the other side, it's pretty tantalizing to offer folks, you can either vote for politicians to spend your money, or you can have this money back, even if it's in the form of a refund of $45. How do you see the news that came down this week?
So I have so much to say and so little time.
I had a feeling.
In which to say it. I mean, I think I've thought about this from a lot of different perspectives, and I think at the heart of it is reflected in all of your comments and in your comment as well, is just how complicated TABOR makes our state's finances. And while the proponents of TABOR try to boil it down to this very simplistic, but it's your right to vote on taxes, there are all of these different elements. The one that I think nobody ever talks about that is getting a lot of oxygen nationally is that TABOR prevents us from having graduated income tax. So if you think that the wealthy should pay a higher tax rate than lower or middle income Coloradans, guess what? TABOR is not your friend. But I think that what I'm trying to focus on this week is let's just look at the outcomes, right? It may be a very great idea and ideal to have voters vote on every single tax question, but let's look at what, the proof is in the pudding. Our schools are underfunded. We have an $11 billion backlog in transportation. There's all of these other things that we're not spending money on. And there's expenses that are coming down the pike that you wouldn't believe, like when the baby boomers finally have to retire and we have to pay for long-term care costs, we won't be able to afford it. So our focus, I think, as the Bell Policy Center and as the movement that I think this is a huge boost to, is going to be, look, great idea, great ideal. Look what it has wrought in our state.
Lynn, you have covered TABOR for many years. You know where all the bodies are buried on this one. As you're seeing the political work on this, people are looking at the results this week. They're saying, okay, here's what all came down. What do you think is going through their minds? What do you think we're going to see out of this pretty big news this week?
Dominic, we discussed this before the show started, and you're already in violation. Just say, Lynn, what do you think? Don't embellish. Well, I will tell you, I didn't cover TABOR from the beginning. I was in New Mexico when it was first passed. Fools. But anyhow, I'm not a fan of TABOR. I'll start out there. It took forever. That won't surprise anybody for me to understand it when I went to the legislature and they sat down with me and I kept saying, this isn't true. I never got a TABOR refund. What are you talking about? I never got a check from Colorado saying, here's your TABOR refund. I don't think a lot of people understand. And remember, 2000, that's when we were going great guns. I don't think people realized it was put into their income tax refund. I go to my tax guy, he goes, and here's your TABOR refund. And I'm like, okay, sign here and all of that. I think the big myth is when they talk about, run government like a business. What business in a downturn would say, well, we're not going to buy new equipment, we're not going to fix the roof, we're not going to fix this. And then when things go good again, say, oh, we're only going to fix part of the roof and we're only going to do this and that. I just don't think TABOR, even though you had Ref C and all that, and you actually eliminated the ratchet effect, isn't that true?
Just for 5 years.
Oh, for 5 years. Well, great. See, we're hosed. But no, it's just this whole thing that it saved us from becoming California. It saved us. In some ways, I don't think it did save us. I think it crippled us. You look at like Jefferson County where they haven't debruced. That county has financial woes up the yin-yang. TABOR may be a friend on we get a vote, but even then, I don't know. Sometimes you just have to, this whole idea that you have to vote on everything, it's nice and all that, but look, everybody voted on what was the big aquarium tank or whatever here in Denver. And I just moved here. I go, what are you talking about? You're a landlocked state. Well, things don't always work out, so much for the vote. I just, this is such a political thing. The other thing you brought up was the campaign. You'd have to have this campaign. They had that with Ref C. You had Hank Brown, Bill Owens, Bruce Benson, and that is not, you're not going to see that this time. And without that, without that group, who's gonna lead you to do this?
True. And they had that Republican trifecta, and they still lost referendum D. There was 2 referendums on that
exactly.
year. That's a good
I have
point.
to mention, that was
Yep.
Colorado's ocean journey, and everyone wanted to go see trout swimming around.
Yeah, do you believe that?
Now you can see why I was so excited during the introductions.